All right, so our final segment will be on near-death experiences. Okay, now you might be thinking to yourself, how is this an altered state of consciousness? Well, not all people who come close to death but live report these experiences. A lot of people do, but not everybody does. So it makes you think, well, maybe it's a way of thinking that some people enter when they think they're near death. Now, the definition of a near-death experience is that you've got a person who came near death. Their heart stopped. They nearly drowned. They were in a car accident and hit their head. I've even heard cases where people thought that they were near death while fighting cancer, things like that. And they had to be resuscitated in most cases and then came back. Now, I keep saying in most cases because some people who report near-death experiences only thought they were near death, and in fact, they were never needing resuscitation or any of those kinds of things. So it's sort of not necessarily always biological. It can be psychological also. But the idea is you were nearly dead, and then you were brought back. Okay. Now, during this experience, people tend to report, those who do report a near-death experience tend to report very similar experiences. They say that they felt like they saw a very bright light at the end of a tunnel, that the light was so bright, but that it didn't hurt their eyes, that they had this sense that they were floating. And some people even report that they were floating in the room and looking down at their own body being resuscitated. Almost everybody reports this overwhelming sense of peace, even though they're seeing their body being resuscitated and it all looks very scary and things like that. They report feeling like they were at peace with it. A lot of reporters say that they saw their loved ones or a religious figure either beckoning them toward the light or turning them away from the light, saying, "Go back." So some people have suggested that these near-death experiences are evidence that there is an afterlife, that when you die, you're going to go to heaven, or that when you die, you're going to be reunited with your loved ones, or when you die, you're going to meet the religious figure. Some people have said that this is all very much wishful thinking, and that maybe it's a function of culture or something. So one researcher decided to examine people who don't believe in heaven or afterlife at all. She recruited a bunch of people who don't belong to a religious belief and they say that they don't believe in heaven or hell, and that experience near death, and she asked them to report what their experience was like, and at the same exact rate as any other demographic, they reported these same symptoms. So the researcher came to the conclusion, maybe this is what you experience, that it may not have to do with preconceived notions about what you're going to experience or whatever. The thing about it, though, is that a lot of this sounds very similar to what we experience when we use hallucinogenic drugs. You've got the sense of peace, right? The euphoria that I mentioned previously. You're perceiving things not through your actual sense organs, but they're directly being perceived by your brain. Like the light at the end of the tunnel is the brightest light the person's ever seen, but it doesn't hurt their eyes. Maybe because it's not coming through your eyes. Maybe it's because it's in your brain, right? It's kind of like, similar to the hallucinations that people have where they see tracers after their fingers and stuff like that, right? So some people have started to wonder, is this evidence of an afterlife, or is this what your brain does when it's shutting down as you're starting to die? We talked at the very beginning of this class about philosophical theories. One theory that I introduced at the beginning of class was monism, the idea that your mind and your body are one, that your mind is generated by the functioning of your brain cells. And so if your brain stops functioning, then of course it's going to shut down your brain automatically, your mind automatically. The alternative is dualism, where it's assumed that your mind and body are separate, so that after your body shuts down, your mind will continue on after and go on to heaven or hell, or go on for reincarnation, something like that, that it'll carry on. Well, monists tend to think that these experiences that people are having are really just hallucinations. And they explain it through biological explanations that, as your brain starts to shut down, the last thing to shut off will be your visual system, and that's why you're perceiving these bright lights that are firing. Your neurons are firing and making these bright lights, and then it seems like it's at the end of the tunnel because it's like you're getting down to the pinpoint. If you've ever passed out, you get that sort of tunnel vision where everything's getting dark and you're only seeing the very middle, and then you lose consciousness. In fact, monists have interviewed fighter pilots who have gone through the centrifuge training mechanism that makes a lot of them pass out, and a lot of them report that the last thing, that they saw a light at the end of the tunnel, and that when they returned to consciousness, that a lot of them were laughing when they returned to consciousness, and a lot of them say, "I want to do it again. That was fun. Why'd you wake me up?" Stuff like that. Monists point to that and say that sounds a whole lot like what people who have had near-death experiences say. Maybe it's just what your brain's doing when it's shutting down, when it's getting deprived of oxygen. That's what your brain does. Dualists, on the other hand, say that these near-death experiences are evidence of the afterlife, and that it's evidence that when your body shuts down, your mind will go on. You'll go see your religious figure or your loved ones. You'll feel completely peaceful. One thing that's really positive about these studies of near-death experiences is that everybody comes to the conclusion that they're less scared of death after they've had a near-death experience. Now, not everybody's near-death experience is positive. Not everybody in a near-death experience envisions themselves going to heaven. There have been people who have envisioned really scary things, like fire and brimstone types of imagery. And even they are less scared of death after having had that experience. But when they come back to life, they definitely change the way they've been living. They definitely change their approach. And, one that sticks out in my mind was an investment banker who had a near-death experience after a car accident on a vacation. And after his near-death experience, he came back. He's like, you know what? I'm giving up that field. He decided to become a minister. Like total change of heart after his near-death experience. So it really informed how he lived the rest of his life, which he's still alive now. But he, even though he had a scary experience, he said, I'm not scared of death, but I am scared of how I've been living my life. And so he changed his life after that. So that's kind of an interesting dichotomy. So the thing is, we don't know whether these near-death experiences are really closer to passing out than they are to death. Because the thing is, all of the reporters came back to life. I mean, we've never been able to interview a person who literally died. So we've only had people who have died and come back, which might be different from actual death. So we don't really know what happens at death. It'll be one of those mysteries that we all get to solve one by one. But if it is what it appears to be, we have these two different theories to try and explain what exactly is going on. And you get to decide for yourself. But your job is just to know monism and dualism. All right. Well, that's enough on Chapter 3. So I will see you guys in Chapter 4.